Thank you very much to the Leader of the Opposition. May I now call upon the second speaker from the government side, Ms. Charlotte Chun.
Thank you, members of the House. We're very grateful to be here on the finals, and we'd like to first thank Mr. Chairman. We'd like to thank the members of the jury. We'd like to thank everybody who's here, and of course, we'd love to thank our very handsome team from Cambridge, ladies and gentlemen. And we'd also really like to thank the champagne here. It's been excellent. All right. So disregarding the irony that the only two non-Eurozone teams in this tournament are debating this motion, we Americans would like to do what we do best, or at least what we think we do best, and tell you guys what to do, right? So, in theory, ladies and gentlemen, the Eurozone was a perfect means of integrating and binding Europe even closer together. What ended up happening was an absolute nightmare. We see that especially with the growing recession, we've seen Germany trying to prop up the entirety of the European Union, and we don't see that the recession is getting any better. So we'd like to show you on our side of the house what's not only beneficial, first priority for Germany, but also that they're also reaping benefits for the other European Union nations with weaker economies, and we'll explain to you exactly why. But before then, let's move on to some rebuttals. So first of all, the Leader of Opposition here comes up and talks about how this is a normative motion, and how we're sort of like shying away from the motion. He said about the word should, right? So let's talk about Aaron, right? Let's say Aaron wants to get a haircut. He should get a haircut. But that doesn't mean that he's doing it because everybody else in the world would benefit from him getting a haircut. He just needs to get a haircut, right? We think it's the same thing for Germany and the European Union. We think Germany should do what it needs to do and let Europe die simply because it's the right thing to do. And that's what we're here to prove to you today. And we think we can convince you very clearly. All right, so they talked about England, right? And they talked about how Germany is self-suicide when we actually... No, thank you, sir. When they say that they're going to just step away from the Eurozone, this is false on 3 levels of analysis. First of all, they told you that over 60% of Germany's economy is based on EU trade, right? This is old statistics. What has happened with the recession? What has ended up happening is that with the declining power of the euro, Germany is shifting its markets to non-European Union nations. That's why China and South Korea and many of the East Asian nations are importing so much from Germany, and therefore Germany's reaping massive benefits through a stable currency, right? So this is first of all, we don't think that's true. Second of all, we also think that Germany has massive benefits, like the UK, to make sure that even if they're not on the euro, that they can also create trading agreements. And third of all, we're going to tell you that they said it's loans, right? It's not gifts. They haven't been paying back, Mr. and Madam Speaker. We've seen the recession get worse. We don't think that this is going to be beneficial for the European Union, right? So we're going to move on to our case and talk to you about how their case, not at this time, actually has very low impact, right? How all the things that they're talking about could be fixed easily even within our motion. So we've seen Germany as the single largest propper up of bailouts. We see that Germany is exposed to 635 billion euros, right? And for the few Americans who are out there in the audience, it's $831 billion. That's a whopping 27% of their GDP, Mr. and Madam Speaker. We don't think that A, by European nations not being able to pay back to Germany, but B, so much of its economy is being invested in bailing out other weaker nations. We think this is insolvent. We also think that it's not sustainable or inducive to other nations to reform their economic policies, because they can fall back on Germany. And this is something that Brian's going to talk to you a little bit more about. Now, the concept of the euro was based on the ideals of a single currency reaping its benefits. Just a moment, sir. In economics, this is a theory called optimal currency zones, right? And there are 4 requirements for this. But before then, what did you have to say to that, sir?
So the reason we haven't seen growth in Europe is because Germany hasn't been willing to take the steps necessary. For example, the Cyprus bailout was 7 billion short, leading to massive chaos in global markets, all because of a short-term political calculus on Angela Merkel. To put it quite simply...
2 levels of analysis, sir. First of all, we think that Germany alone cannot prop up all of the money that is being spent on bailouts. We've already told you that 27% of its GDP, which is a significant amount, is already being put in. We think Germany has done everything within its power to help the European Union. It's not helping. helping. Second of all, by focusing solely on Germany, we think that this is creating a significant imbalance within the Eurozone and the European Union. We think that we should have more cooperation with other nations other than Germany. We think this is very beneficial. So going back to our speech, the 4 requirements of the optimal currency zone, none of which the Eurozone has. First, the member states of the zone not at this time must have similar economies, meaning that external shocks will affect them in roughly the same way. Second, their economic business cycle must be in sync. Third, they must share a common economy. And finally, they must share fiscal policies. No, sir. For example, the French economy, as we learned yesterday, is based on wine, cheese, and lingerie, while the Swiss economy is based on chocolate and watches. The Greek economy, at this point, not really anything. So in the end, what happens is that the stronger economies are forced to bail out weaker economies, but on top of that, reap negative returns because they are bound by inflexible policies due to the differences in these economies, due to the fact that there are weaker nations within the European Union. Yes, sir.
By your own admission, Germany is contributing 28, not 100% of all bailouts. Surely other nations are pitching in to the tune of 72%.
Mr. and Madam Speaker, Germany is by far contributing the most out of all of the European Union nations. We don't think that it should be propping up the entirety of the European Union. We don't think that's Germany's obligation. We actually think it's worse than the European Union as well, right? You're out of time, sir. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at Germany's economy and why it's unique, right? So the fact that its export is shifting away from within EU nations is something that we've addressed in a rebuttal. So that's why we see that, because there's a very inflexible demand for high-end technological goods, especially in East Asia. We're seeing that Germany itself can shift away its economy and still be stable, Mr. and Madam Speaker, by stepping away from the Eurozone. It can set up its monetary policy so that its mark could be at a higher level, at levels, and whichever they think is best for Germany. So this is beneficial for the German economy. Why is it beneficial for the other EU nations as well? This is because that even during a business cycle, one of them is eventually going to kill the Eurozone for good. There's no point wasting breath on giving CPR to the European Union when there aren't sustainable practices. And therefore, Mr. and Madam Speaker, we're very proud to propose, thank you very much, Bellboy, on this motion.